Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to Obtainable Breath through my opening and art talk here for M Gallery's Fellowship. My name is Terri Fraser, and I am a oil painter and three-dimensional sculptor. Today's show is about the oil paintings, and we are standing here next to Sisters, which is a painting I created during COVID about me thinking about my sisters and I. The three circles are the representation of my sisters and I. I have played with cold wax and pigment sticks, and it is all on paper, and I did a diptych of it, so there's a slight separation. That separation is a representation of the fact that it was done during COVID and none of us were able to get near or next to each other. Not that we can. I have a sister that lives in Colorado. I have a sister that lives in Nantucket, and I live in New Jersey. So that's a little bit of what this is. There's a horizon line in my work because I'm very influenced by Mother Nature. And I also have a semic. Frank, help me out again. A semic. A semic writing because my little sister and I, when we were young, were super close, and we used to have our own little conversations in our own language. And so I did a little scribbly to represent that language that we had. I've been asked what about the wax. So I work in two different kinds of wax. I work in cold wax, which is a medium that works with oil paints, and I work in encaustic, which is a hot wax that gets melted like candles, beeswax. So, and I work with that as well. So those are two different mediums, and they both work really well with oils. They play really nicely with oil. Not so much with acrylics, because acrylics don't like to be, the cold wax will not work with with acrylic. It's not meant to at all. So, but it is a paste-like wax that is opaque when you are looking at it in the container, and when you take it out of the container and you put pigment in with it, you can get a little bit of color to go on to the surface with it, or you can get no color to cover the surface of it. So it is just it helps seal the paper, so that you can look directly at it, because otherwise, when you are working with paper, they tell you, oh, you have to put it behind glass, right? Well, I'm one of those obnoxious artists. I don't like that, because then you've got this barrier between you and the paper has such a luscious texture to it that I don't want you to miss that. And I feel that going behind, sometimes when you have to put things behind glass, you're missing that beautiful texture. Oh, influences. Nature, other artists, mundane, memories, sometimes some politics. None of these are about politics, but sometimes I do work with about, what's happening in the world. Humanity is a big thing for me. The presence of humanity and kindness and being human is really important. The artist that I am super influenced by, Louise Bourgeois. Does anybody know who Louise Bourgeois is? She's a French artist. Has anybody seen the big spider things that are in Barcelona? I think there's a permanent one in Barcelona. I think there's one in California. Am I remembering correctly? Is anybody? Arkansas? Arkansas. She, incredible artist, did all kinds of things from printmaking, sewing, sculpture, collaging. She would make, she made an outfit out of fabric for herself. She lived in New York City. And it was the seed sack, the egg sack for the spiders. And she walked around New York City in this, you know, egg sack that she sewed together. So she just was prolific and every kind of genre and medium that you could think of, and courageous, and I'm going to say it, a little bit of a ball buster. She was a tough cookie, but she was wonderful, and she was all about her art. She would sit and make a circle and say, this is my fear, and here are my fears inside of it. I'm afraid of dying. Here's my fear of dying. I'm afraid of, losing my son. Here's that fear. And, she would just sit there, and that was her work. Eva Hesse is another one of my favorite artists. She was also a courageous woman. She did not live very long because she died of a brain tumor, but she broke the mold too. She didn't believe in boundaries. She did a lot of latex and fiberglass making of structures, and she started off as a two-dimensional artist and went into three-dimensional. Jasper Johns is another one. I don't know if anybody knows Jasper Johns. Another one of my favorite artists. I was so PO'd one time and went in and saw his work, and I was like, what the heck? He's using screen? I'm using screen? That's not fair. I didn't even know he did it, and, come on. So yeah, he's another very deep thinker and cerebral painter, which I love the way he does that as well. So. Think about my non-art influences. Mother Nature, always, forever, is the first thing that comes to mind for me. I live in the middle of the woods, and I love it. Between coyotes at night, the birds, the owls, the down trees that you hear falling at random times, it's wonderful. So she's also very grounding for me. So Mother Nature is probably the biggest influence, and then, daily things are also. So it could be something that happened to me during the week. It could be, something that is a memory from years ago. But all of that kind of goes into my work. So Cool Blues is a painting that was kind of about the way I perceived my mom, actually. I put a horizon line in, so this is my nature influence. That's my horizon line right there. So there is a different texture here than there is up there, different colors. So yeah, the rings are all different layers of what my mother is, and in a Louise Bourgeois way. Of course, always. Well, I don't know if I can master the Louise Bourgeois things, but yes. When I am creating these works, and the circles are here, I'm thinking about the layers and the transparencies and what is coming through and how you may or may not see it. The drips I wanted to keep clearly here, and so some of this circle here is coming through in a slightly different color, while maintaining the drips from, the texture coming down. I created this a slightly darker one. There's a slight negative space of a circle in this one, back being pushed back. But, yeah.
Do you put the drips in first or not?
Do I put the drips in first? I don't remember when I put these drips in. These drips probably came in halfway through, if I am remembering correctly, because I did a grid and I did the paint with the screen in there to create a texture, and I had to let it dry all the way. So I wanted to have it so that I wanted the pigment to kind of get in and out of in and out of the texture of the screen in there. So that's probably midway. It's a good question.
What
You're making me
brought the
think.
paintings up there and then over on the other?
The pink?
Yeah.
I brought the pink in because I was thinking of colors in a sky of clouds and the different kinds of colors that you'll see when you are looking at the sky, but I didn't want it to be looking like a sky. I didn't want you to go, oh, look, isn't that a pretty puffy cloud? I just wanted to have elements of the sky kind of implemented in there. And I went darker down below so that, you know, it's more of a intuitive, always felt like my mom was very intuitive, so the blues actually lend themselves, in my mind, to a more intuitive kind of thoughts in pink. Window thoughts in pink is another study like the blue with pink, with a pink. Decision making on this was pretty random. I just was like, yeah, let me see, let me just put it down the middle and I'm just going to play with it. Once again, I have pencil, fat, chubby mark making of white, some spaces that are not white. I also pulled in a grayer green color in here. I'm trying to remember what that paint stick is, and I cannot. Along with the blues, ultramarine, and I don't remember the blue one either right now off the top of my head. But some of my more favorite newer colors that I was using. So this thoughts in pink. These are more studies, definitely. You know, this was me just kind of playing and saying, wow, I really love that teaching tool that I brought out and thought this needs to go into an actual painting. So yeah, so I pulled in a green and a yellow. So I have a green and a yellow one, you know, so some of it has to do with seasonal, you know, north, south, east, west, that sort of thing when they're all four together. There's always a conversation that you'll see between all of my work. You know, they all kind of talk to each other. Because I also do sculptural things at this point, and those are very different from these two-dimensional paintings. But they all kind of have this kind of wonderful conversation about grids and circles and landscapes and Mother Nature and all kinds of emotions. For all of these paintings, I do have a way of making grids that is a little bit more, not freehand. You know those nasty, awful green plastic fences? That's how I made this one. Yeah. Yes.
Do you grid first or do the circles?
I usually grid first. I usually do the grid, and then I'll put the circle on top. And then I will play with, do I want, you know, not so much this one and not those so much, but when we get down to the green one, I'll play with who's in front, who's on top, where, you know, how am I playing with the three-dimensional surface of what is going on a two-dimensional surface in the painting. So the push and the pull kind of thing. And then the rest of these, I would draw them out. I'd get my ruler and draw them out. I got lazy at a point, and the thickness of the ruler was cool with me. So that's kind of what I did. I would just kind of put the ruler down and just do it from the ruler. The larger the paintings go, I would actually do what I thought was appropriate for the size of the structure of what I wanted, my intention of what I wanted to get out of it. I have always wanted to find a way to paint three-dimensionally, and I was trying all kinds of horrible experiments, and it was just terrible. And finally, a fellow artist that I met through Art Fair 14C, her name is Megan Clem, was playing with encaustics, which are these, are my encaustics that are in this show. And I was like, oh, I should absolutely do encaustic. So during COVID, I started playing with encaustic in my studio with, no ventilation because I am super pretty that way. And these are later, but I have a lot of works that resulted from that. And I found that I really enjoyed how they puff out. And the tools that I use for these, hardware cloth. I'm pretty sure hardware cloth, and if it isn't, I'm going to say it is because I like what it represents, is the foundational tool for plaster or for when you are working with cement. Sounds good, right? Totally made that up. Right? But I like my grids, they are a foundational element, and so I love the fact that it's a foundation, and on it I have, I played with encaustic, and some of them have tissue paper on them, and then these are my great-grandmother's old tablecloths that I have also added on, and there are, there's history. Yeah, there's that element of history and where, they come from. I did put some oil pigments into these and some oil paints into them. So they've got a little bit of shadowing that doesn't really exist, but I worked at putting that into those. So these are some of the other mediums and elements that I use. And you can't see it because I don't have it here. I have since started to make my own wire grids. And I've implemented found objects, and I still use my encaustic, but I also use gut, meaning sausage casing. If you're going to make sausage, when you make sausage, the casing, I've started using that, and I will color it with alcohol ink. So it has a little bit richer, it's a very abstract way for me to represent more of that humanity and connections and, history and all the layering of storytelling that I want to have go into some of these. I move fast. I get ideas, I get them, I go, yes, not quite there yet, let me do something else. Yup, not quite it, let me keep going so that I can find where I want to get to. There are things that I have found and I know it's what I want to do, but I cannot afford to do what I really want to do. So I move on to something else. So it did start with this, and then because I wanted to find three-dimensionality, the grids went into the cage. I call these caged pillows. And some of them I've made to try to make it look like a pillow and, give it those bends like somebody rested their head in it kind of thing. I really like Maine. I had a really good time painting Maine. I played with all kinds of elements when you are working in abstract. And if I had a really good memory, I could tell you what Gary Steffen said about when you are working in an abstract field on a two-dimensional surface, there is, I can't remember all four of them, there is the element of being at an edge, there is being on top, and then there are elements of being under. And then there's one more, and I cannot remember what it is. But I played with all of that, and then was thinking about all of that, and then on Instagram, I saw his, he put it up on Instagram. I was like, oh man, that's exactly what I'm doing. So, moments where, like I mentioned over there, but it's a little bit more apparent because I've changed colors in here of the grid coming down, disappearing, going behind, being up on front, once again disappearing, and then coming back and going off of, it's hit it's at the edge of the surface. I also have played with elements where there's actually paint, but I wanted it to look like the surface of the raw plywood that is on here. And there's a lot of push and pull, and this little portal, I just wanted to have it straight here, right sitting on top of everything, and not much of it is going through it. I don't think anything is. Not really, no. So, but I played with that. The grids, once again, who's in the front, who's in back, what's important, what isn't important. Landscape, sky, light, dark, landscape elements. I did play with that. I did play with, let me see if I can't get it real tight and firm, and then I decided I didn't like it as much, so I also made ones that were really oversized. I found that the more the oversized it was, the less structurally sound it was. So this is actually the happy medium of caged pillow with structure and where I landed with it. I also, because of this, I was playing with the corners to make it more look like a pillow. So instead of folding it over like I did with this piece, I folded the edges up and over so it's nice and clean. That one I let the edges go off and I just, let it do its thing. They all have a way of talking with each other, and they all relate to each other, even the newer works, which are absolutely crazy town. But they all have this conversation that relates to each other. This is one of the earlier ones, and somebody, I couldn't understand what this ribbon grid was. I did not know how to identify it. I liked making it. It was super fun to make. I think it was because when I started making these, I was looking at the work I'd done in college. And the works that I had done in college were these circles with these weird little fun little, ribbony kind of looking square grid mark making things. And so I was just including that into this, but it no longer held any relevance for me. And so I did away with it. They all have a similar squiggly kind of vibe. Yeah. I also, was a little girl that had ribbons put in her hair on the top of her head. How do I feel about a non-artist looking at my work? I have, so I just also had another show that I was able to watch people actually interact with my work, and some of them were non-artists and some of them were artists. Everybody had a reaction. Some of it was good, some of it was like, okay, and walked right on through. The non-artist, I'm not sure they understood what I was working at saying. It was too out of the norm and not identifiable, but there were a handful of non-artists that actually really did like the work because of, what did they say to me? It had a very organic, my new work has a very organic, kind of like the ribbon part of Maine, has a very organic kind of ocean kind of vibe to it, and so that was something everyone kind of identified with. Artists like my work more, a lot more. So that I do find when it comes to my work. If you're asking me about the world of art, I think there's all kinds of levels, and the availability and the Instagram element of it is, it's a good and a bad thing, because there is some very good work on Instagram and there's some very bad work. It's a little bit more accessible with Instagram, and I'm not sure I use those tools. I would like to not have to use those tools, because then I could spend more time focusing on what I really want to do. But it is something, I had to learn how to make videos and become a better photographer, and how do I market and how do I write things, and this is a whole nother thing that is another hat as an artist that you have to wear. I love the braveness of a lot of the newer work that is coming out. I enjoy the out of the box of what is considered art, and not just that, but the mediums with which people are using that is considered art. It goes back to Louise and Ava Hesse, who were making art from non-traditional art materials. And there's a lot of courage in some of the work that I have seen that is getting put out there. And there is a rawness and a beauty that is coming along with many of some of my favorite pieces that are out there that have this incredible tension that also brings this unbelievable beauty. And I think it speaks to the way the world is, you know. There's a lot of tension and all kinds of angst in the world, and we need to take, I like how many of the artists understand that and take that and also are creating beauty with it, because we have to pause and stop and look at the beauty in the world and honor it and respect it in order to have it there and see it. So I just like to create. It's just who I am, you know. I can tell you I've not been creating as much as I normally do, and my husband will let you know that I'm a little bit of an ugly human being. And now that I get to create, I'm much more balanced and happier and healthier, because I communicate, because I'm a visual artist, through the visual. I don't do as well with vocabulary, so yeah. So thank you, everyone, for coming to my opening of Obtainable Breath. I'm Terri Fraser, and I really appreciate your time and your patience for listening to my ramble on. Thank you.
Yay.